Anatomy of the Spirit by Carolyn Mace, who's an intuitive healer. Her story is an interesting one. Her last name is spelled M-Y-S-S. If you want to go Google her or check out her website or YouTube for some of her teachings. She's a bit crusty but brilliant and really helped me over the years fill in the cracks in my metaphysical understanding. We started a few weeks ago with first chakra and second chakra, so today we're moving to third chakra, which is personal power from the Eastern perspective. Third chakra energy, the energy of the personal power chakra, becomes the dominant vibration in our development during puberty. It assists us further in the process of individuation, of forming a self, an ego, and a personality separate from our inherited identity. This energy center also contains most issues related to the development of personal power and self-esteem. The third chakra completes the physical trilogy of the human energy system. And like chakras 1 and 2, it primarily relates to a physical form of power, where the first chakra resonates to group or tribal power, and where the second chakra resonates to the flow of power between the self and others. The third chakra relates to our personal power in relation to the external world. It's located in the solar plexus, which is right below the breastbone. Energy connection to the physical body, stomach, pancreas, adrenals, upper intestines, gallbladder, liver, and the middle spine, located right behind the solar plexus. Energy connection to the emotional or mental body. The third chakra, often called the solar plexus, is our personal power center, the magnetic core of the personality and the ego. The illnesses that originate here are activated by issues related to self-responsibility, self-esteem, fear of rejection, and an oversensitivity to criticism. Symbolic and perceptual connection. The third chakra mediates between the primarily external, which is characteristic of the first and second chakras, and the internalization of consciousness. The first chakra has an external center of gravity and is always located within a group mind. The second chakra, too, has an external gravitational center, but focuses on relationships and their effects on us. In the third chakra, however, the gravitational center is partly internalized, as our focus shifts from how we relate to people around us to how we relate to and understand ourselves. The connection between the third chakra and the sacraments of the Church of Rome and the Sephirot of the Kabbalah. The Sephirah of Neza represents the divine quality of endurance, as Esty told us about last week. The Sephirah of Hod symbolizes the majesty or integrity of the divine. In the chakra system, these two qualities are partnered because within the Kabbalistic tradition, both represents the qualities we need in order to stand up as individuals. Thus, Neza and Hod are symbolically illustrated as the legs of the body. They are also considered the source of prophecy and the center of symbolic sight. The symbolic meaning of Neza and Hod forms a powerful spiritual bond with the sacrament of confirmation. This sacrament represents the emergence of the conscious self, or that part of the human personality that is eternal and naturally aligned to the sacred. Primary fears are fears of rejection, criticism, looking foolish, and failing to meet one's responsibilities. All fears related to physical appearance, such as fear of obesity, baldness, or aging, fears that others will discover our secrets. Primary strength, self-esteem, self-respect, and self-discipline. Ambition, the ability to generate action and the ability to handle a crisis, the courage to take risks. Generosity, ethics, and strength of character are all reflected in this third chakra. And the sacred truth of the third chakra is honor oneself, a theme supported by the spiritual energies of the Sephirot of Neza, endurance, and Hod, majesty, and by the symbolic meaning of the sacrament of confirmation, as well as by the power inherent in the third chakra. The energies that come together in this chakra have but one spiritual goal: to help us master in our self-understanding, to help us mature in our self-understanding, the relationship we have with ourselves and how we stand on our own and take care of ourselves. The spiritual qualities conferred by the sacrament of confirmation is self-respect. This sacrament also symbolizes the passage from childhood to adulthood. We all have faced or will face an experience that reveals to us our own internal strengths and weaknesses as separate from the influence of our elders. The spiritual quality inherent in the third chakra compels us to create an identity apart from our tribal self. And I also want to read a short piece from Paul Ferrini's Silence of the Heart. This one's called Faith. You cannot have faith in God unless you have faith in yourself and in your brother. But ask yourself, what is faith? Is it the belief in something that you perceive as lacking in your life? If so, it is not faith. Faith is never the perception of lack. Faith is the perception of goodness in that which appears to be evil. It's the perception of abundance in what appears to be not enough. It is the perception of justice in that which seems unfair. Faith is the bringing of love to the unlovable. It is the bringing of compassion to the unmerciful. It is the bringing of God's presence to the places where she seems to be absent. Faith is the recognition of a higher good, a higher order, a higher truth than the one the frightened child would see. And faith is always won in the trenches. Where do you find your faith? In your most intense suffering. Where do you find God's presence? In the moments when you feel totally abandoned and rejected. This seems to be unfair, but it is hardly so. As long as you believe that you can be attacked, the Christ child will be perceived as an abused child. Small and defenseless, he does not fight back. He does not resist evil because he knows evil is simply the perceived absence of love. And the perceived absence of love can be transformed only by love's presence. The strongest power in the universe seems to be so weak, so easily overpowered, crucified and forgotten. But it is not so. All who attack the Christ must return to serve him. And they will keep coming back until they learn that he is them, and therefore he cannot be destroyed. Is this unfair? To know that all attack is self-attack? To fulfill the karmic law until one learns to rise above it? How can it be unfair? Only in the deepest pain of existence is faith in God discovered and confirmed. This is no mystery. It's the turning away from self-attack. It is the moment in which you realize that everything outside you is merely a reflection of an attitude you have toward yourself. In that moment of realization, you stop being a victim. In that moment, you know your life has been perfect just as it is and as it has been. In that moment, you claim your life, your authorship, your divine lineage. You are not the boy who was nailed to the cross or the girl burned at the stake, but the child who learned to bless himself and in so doing saved the world. You are the saint. You are the angel. You are the Savior. And when you awaken, my job will be complete. In truth, it's already complete. But you will keep returning until you know this in your heart, once and for all. It's a hard truth.
No, I disagree with you.
Well, good.
Tell us more.
But let it sit, and maybe it will germinate.
No, I just, from personal experience, I found love in joyful things. That's why I dance.
Well, yes, that's true. God is in joyful things. But to find God in joyful things is not typically part of our spiritual maturation. So what I want to talk about for a minute is the process of spiritual maturation. When we are born, We are born in that first chakra, tribal energy. We are totally dependent on our tribe for survival. And our tribe is our family of origin, or the orphanage we end up in, or foster home we end up in, or wherever the people are who keep us alive as infants, that's our tribe. And then that's the close-in tribe. And then there's a larger tribe around the culture that those individuals identify with. And then there's a larger tribe around the larger culture, or nation perhaps, that those people identify with. And then an even larger tribe that we call humanity. But humanity is not a tribe of which we are aware at the beginning. Nor is culture or nation a tribe we are aware of at the beginning. We are only aware of the interaction we have with those handful of people who keep us alive. And so we begin as infants, spiritually, physically, emotionally, mentally. And then, a few years later, around the age of 7 or so, we start to really have a sense of self and other, and our ability to choose our interactions with others. Up until that point, we're kind of mimicking the interactions we see in the people who we experience. So it's imitation, the scientists say, until about age 6 or 7. And that's when the discriminating mind kicks in, and we are able to, for the first time in our lives, actually begin to consciously choose our reactions and our paths, the way we interact with other people. So this is a level of maturation, spiritual maturation, where we now begin to interact with others and begin to test the transactional nature of persona to persona. I want to get this. How do I get this? How do I get kind attention? How do I get approval? How do I get access to power? If I act certain ways, I get rejection. If I act other ways, I get approval. And then we can start to discriminate. Well, I get rejection from these people, but approval from these people. And then we start to weigh which one is more important. So we begin to mature. Usually this is the age when traditionally religion is introduced to the child. And religion, in its traditional sense, is what? It's a series of stories. It's a narrative. Religion is presented to us as a narrative, and it's a story, and it's usually a story that has magic in it. Mm-hmm. There's magic that happens in the story. All religions have their stories in which things happen that we would label as magical, because we don't have a rational explanation for them. And then ultimately those stories of magic become myth. They take on the form of mythology. So it's not just isolated stories of magic, but a congruent narrative that's mythic in nature. And so we become adolescents. The problem is most religions stop there. This is a good first car to get in and ride a ways to start to deepen one's spiritual maturity. But when we get to the point of adolescence, which is where the Catholics and the Lutherans usually do their confirmation, that's that rite of passage from childhood to adulthood. And it's kind of a little bit clouded up here because in our culture we have this adolescence is its own thing. Most indigenous cultures, when you hit puberty, you are initiated into adulthood. There is no buffer of adolescence. In our culture, because of the way we've developed an industrialized, modern, quote-unquote, culture, we have this what I call grace period of adolescence. And I know those of you who have parented adolescents don't see it as a grace period. But it's not a grace period for the parents, it's a grace period for the child. To enter into the area where they can experiment with development of their own sense of self. And their relationship, not just with their tribe, their relationship not just with their peers, with others, the immediate others, but they start to become aware that they have a relationship with their world as a whole, with their sense of reality. And they begin to experiment with this. And in a perfect world, we have enough controls on an environment that they're allowed a certain amount of freedom to experiment, but we have safety nets and boundaries set up to allow them not to stray too far. This, when we hit adolescence, there's another thing that happens in our spiritual maturity. We move from being aware of our relationship to our tribe, and we become aware of our relationships one-on-one with other people. And then as adolescents, we start to get a sight, a first vision of a relationship with humanity. So in the beginning, we can only relate to what we're thinking, feeling, and wanting. And then we develop over the years, sometime after the age of reason, we start to develop the sense of compassion, or the ability to sense the feelings of others. And it comes quicker for some of us than for others. But we start to develop this sense, I can feel your pain. I can walk a mile in your shoes. I can put myself in your place and imagine what it's like to be you. And then, as adolescents, as spiritual adolescents, we begin to develop this larger comprehension of humanity as a whole. And that supersedes national boundaries, cultural boundaries, all other boundaries. We start to relate to ourselves as part of a human species. And again, this comes sooner for some, later for others, another lifetime for even others. But this is spiritual maturity. This is what it looks like. Spiritual maturity looks like the ability to relate as a cell in the body of humanity. But it starts the step before that. It starts with this creation of, or in that step, it starts with a creation of my own sense of identity. And then relating it to the tribe, to others' reactions. We start to bend and shape and manipulate and form that personality in a way that we can start to get more of what we like and less of what we don't like. So it's a bit of a, that all flows pretty gracefully. It's a bit of a leap to transcend the tribal messages of culture and nation and race to begin to ultimately embrace the concept of humanity. And this is where we're all what we're all maturing into. If I have a damaged or aberrant vision of my own worth, I cannot get to that sense of oneness with humanity. It's very difficult. Until I develop a sense of my own, until I can become comfortable in my own skin, until I can become aware of the gifts I was given, until I can realize that I have the capacity to choose and create, and that and in order to do that, I have to escape the tribal mentality. And the tribal mentality we are laboring under at the moment is victimhood. Victimhood is our tribal meme right now. These people are taking your jobs. These people are creating your discomfort. These people are making you sick. These people are making you poor. These people are keeping you from being educated. These people are keeping you from experiencing career success. That person's not allowing you to be in a loving relationship. Easy to blame. To blame. One of the etymological roots of the word Satan. Interesting. Satan. Satan? That which sets in opposition, the opposer, to blame. And Satan is nothing more than our own lack of self-esteem, our own lack of self-worth. And don't beat yourself up. Somebody else is probably already taking care of that for you. You're probably as beaten up as you need to be.
Amen.
And if you're not, stop after the service and we'll see if we can help you out.
Well, isn't the trick trying to reconcile that with the larger tribe that we call our nation?
Well, again, we have tribes inside of tribes. It's like
Right.
a Russian nesting dolls, right?
Which perspective are you speaking from?
But typically, the mentality of victimhood persists up into and including the tribe of nation state. If you look at the history of nation states, it's all about victimization. Those folks over there, they did this to us, and so we need to strike back. You want peace on earth? I'm sorry. This may seem just completely out of school. But we are not ever going to have world peace as long as we have nation states.
Yeah.
The game is, it's like, it's like, really 2 NFL teams are going to walk out in the field and embrace each other and flip the ball back and forth between each other and say, let's just call it a tie?
Well, with globalizations, all those borders are, they're just fiction.
Phil says the borders are fiction. Well, they are certainly created by humans and certainly changed over time, right?
Well, it's all a legal fiction if you think about it.
There's been a consensus, there's been an agreement on the part of the human spirit to allow this, because it created a certain level of development. It helped create a bigger tribe for us to expand our sense of tribal belonging.
It's not so much fiction almost as magic. I say this is so, and so it is.
Right, but like I said, there are people who say it, but then there's also, at some level, there's agreement. There's agreement. I've always said, no people could ever, this hit me when I was a teenager, no people could ever be, there can never be oppression in any country without at least the tacit consent of the people being oppressed.
Right, well, I don't consent.
I'm sorry? Well, you can look anywhere in the world. There's oppression happening everywhere. You don't have to look any farther than our own town. But at some point, and if you look at the people around the world, somewhere around, according to people like Ken Wilber, somewhere around 60 to 70% of the people on the planet are still locked in to the magic mythological stage of theology, still relating to their tribe as very distinctly as culture, race, and nation state. A minority of humans really have this vision and feeling and embodiment of the human species that we are part of. So there is room for maturation. And until that maturation happens, we're going to continue to play out the memes of violence and oppression and victimization that we've been playing out for thousands of years. So, when Gandhi says, be the change you want to see in the world, this takes us back to the as above, so below paradigm, where I can look out there and say, that's awful, Those people shouldn't be doing that. That person is evil. That person is bad. But that person's good, and I like that person, and, you know, we have our likes and our dislikes. But it's all externalized, and we've abandoned our own sense of reality, our own sense of who we truly are, and our own sense of responsibility and compliance. And you say, well, I'm not responsible and I'm not compliant. Not on a conscious level, I'm not. But so much of our vibratory nature is generated by our subconscious, by this belief system that we've had injected into us by our tribe. We're still walking around with tribal energy. Absolutely. So as each of us matures spiritually through our individual endeavor, our individual volition, as we mature from spiritual children and spiritual adolescence into spiritual adulthood. I love to tell the story of when I was married, and this may give you some insight into why I'm not. When I was married, my wife, who hardly ever said anything to criticize me, which she probably should have, said something critical one day, and I just said, honey, I'm just trying to get in touch with my inner child. Ha, 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 ha. She said, honey, you need to get in touch with your inner adult. And it took me by surprise, but over the years I've come to see that the exact wisdom in that statement. Not that we have to be our grandparents or our parents' representation of what an adult looks like. We can still be frivolous, we can still have fun, we can still do silly things, but at some point we have to take responsibility for our own relationship to our universe. That's spiritual maturity. Transcends all the tribal and interpersonal relationships. Those tribal and interpersonal relationships are building blocks that allow us to get to the point where we can move into compliance with humanity as our identity. And this also reflects the movement from dependence. We're born in dependence. We are depending on other people to keep us alive. No baby can survive just thrown out on the sidewalk. We depend on other people. At some point in adolescence, we strive to become independent. Right? Adolescents, what do they want more than anything? I want to be me. I want to do what I want to do. I want to make my own choices. Much to the trepidation of the parents. Because we were teenagers once too, and we know where that leads. But all right, we have to let them make some mistakes. But ultimately, even once we become independent, that's not the end of human evolution. It's not the end of the cycle of spiritual maturation. The next phase is interdependence. And in interdependence, we are each strong, capable, self-reliant, self-aware, and yet identifying with humanity as our species, humanity as what we are part of, and humanity as what we serve. And so we are able to become vulnerable enough to become interdependent. And you can't get from dependence to interdependence without going through independence first. That's what we've been up to. That's what makes this country so great, or has been so great for a while, because it created a model for independence where no such model existed in a nation state before this one. That was the dream of the Founding Fathers. A nation where people could act independently. And that's great, until it's not. Until you reach the point in your maturation process where that too needs to be transcended, where that husk needs to be shucked off, so that we can have the next stage of growth into full, mature, adult, spiritual beings, cells in the body of humanity. When that happens for me, and it happens for you, it'll begin to happen for the world, and we will have peace.
Woo!
We will have prosperity. We will have compassionate action. And it will be the triumph, ultimately, of love over fear. Because that's what this is all about. Growing into the perspective of unconditional, compassionate, loving kindness as the motivating factor for all of our behaviors, all of our feelings, all of our choices.
But isn't that your perception?
Hmm?
Your perception of what might be compassion and somebody else's might be two different things. I mean,
What is
your-
compassion?
I mean, our identities of, I mean, there are people that believe they're doing the right thing, and but yet you believe it's
Right.
the wrong thing, and but yet who is right? I mean, it depends on how you look at it.
Well, you bring up the idea, the question, what is compassion?
Yeah.
What is a compassionate act? And I had this, a few years ago, I had the great privilege of producing a documentary for the PBS affiliates in Milwaukee on homelessness. So I spent 2 years of my life immersed in the sad tale of people, tales of folks who ended up homeless. And so I began to wrestle with that very question. What is if I give this guy a buck, or I give him $5, he's going to run off and buy a bottle of wine, right? Or if I do this for this person, am I really helping them? So I was stuck. I was on the horns of a dilemma. So I went back to my area of origin, and I looked up friends of mine for whom I have great respect, who are about my age, a little bit younger, but are lifelong Hindu scholars. They're white folks from the Midwest, just like me, but they've studied since they were in their early 20s. They have pursued an in-depth and scholarly study of the Hindu faith. And so I asked them, I said, what's compassion? What's a truly compassionate act? And they said, here's what their answer was. The only thing that you do that's compassionate is when you do something that assists another person in their awakening or in their spiritual maturation process. Anything else is self-serving. So then it's a question of discernment, personal discernment. I'm not going to figure this out. I'm in the presence of a situation. I need to choose action or inaction. If I choose action, what action? And my mind is busy racing. No, shh. Honey, I know what you want to do. That's okay. This is big boy stuff. We're going to go down here. We're going to see what this says. We're going to see what our inner knowing has to say about this. And then we're going to act or not act based on that, what I call just-in-time information. JITI, just-in-time information. Because we have it. It's always available to us if we can quiet this thing that's trying to scheme, bargain, and negotiate. So, the born-again Christians have the what would Jesus do? I love that. But for some people, the word Jesus is a turn-off. So what would love do? WWLD. What would love do? Just ask that question. Anytime, I had this discussion with my former father-in-law years ago, I said, because he's a really good man and a strong Catholic, but there are certain memes he's got in his head that are mean. And I go, and his name is Gene too, interestingly. I said, Gene, here's all you have to ask. When I think this way, am I feeling loving or am I feeling fearful? And fear shows up as hate, aggression, regret, all kinds of ways. But is it fear-based or is it love-based? That's the only discernment we ever need to do. And it sounds simple. It is simple, but it is not easy because we have this Watson up here figuring it all out, 18 moves ahead, trying to negotiate a particular outcome. It's not how the heart works. The heart works for good. For good. For
But
good.
They could argue and say, I'm doing this for the love of my family or the love of my country, which is justified that way too.
But again,
And it's like, it's always this battle
Mhm.
back and forth.
is that discernment or is that emotional immaturity?
Yeah.
And again, you just have to look at the history of those kind of decisions and see where it has led people. So, at this point, we're going to just say it's time for us to practice. to practice operating from love. We do that with our Namaste greeting, which is finding each other, looking into each other's eyes as a mature spiritual adult, and sending pure love and adoring the spiritual adult in each other.
You know?
Finish?